Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television is sponsored by Nutrien. Nutrien, feeding the future.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspective. This is a public affairs presentation of Florida Gateway College. My name is Mike McKee, and my program today is on Haven Hospice and some services that are offered through the local Haven Hospice here in Lake City. My guests are Jenny Lyons, who is an adult care program manager, social worker at Haven, and Debbie French, who does a lot of public relations for Haven, and she's going to describe what Haven is all about and what it means to North Central Florida and patients toward the end of their life. We'll do that when we come back. Don't go away.
I'm a retired school psychologist, and helping people was my thing. After my stroke, when Meals on Wheels started, I was on the other end of the stick, so to speak, and I appreciated it very much, the attention that was given. My name is Julius Gaines, creative writer, poet, photographer. America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. We'd also like to welcome the listeners to this program on WQHL and WCJX Radio. We thank them for listening to the program today. My guests represent Haven Hospice. We have Jenny Lyons, who is a licensed social worker who works at Haven, but she wears a lot of hats. We're going to talk about an adult care or an advanced care planning program that they have at Haven. And we also have Debbie French, who is going to talk to us about what Haven is all about. Welcome to you both. You're both new. We've had some other folks from Haven on before, but this is your first time. We hope it's a good experience for you. Debbie, I want to start with you. You and I have known each other for a very long time through our work in United Way and things like that. Talk about what Haven is, because I think there may be a public misconception on what exactly a hospice does.
Okay. Well, we recently changed our name from Haven Hospice to just Haven because we do so much more than just end of life. But our bulk of our services do include taking care of folks at the end of life. And it is Medicare guidelines say 6 months prognosis or less. And we provide all the services that someone would need to take care of their loved one in the home or wherever they live, and that would include doctors, nurses, social workers, CNAs for personal care, all that sort of thing is included in the services under the hospice benefit. But we also, in addition to that, offer bereavement for the community and for individuals that are having a hard time with a loved one that may have passed away. And we have transitions, which is a program where folks can kind of get involved with our services before they need hospice, and they may have a life-limiting illness, but they haven't reached the point where they're wanting to enroll in hospice or are medically eligible, and that's a telephone support program where we talk with them weekly or bi-weekly, whatever the need is. In addition to transitions, we have palliative care consultations, which we are getting ready to initiate in the local hospital here. And of course, advanced care planning, which is what we are here for today to talk about. And that will be the bulk of what we discussed this day.
Well, and either one of you can answer this question, but again, you don't know what it's like to go through end of life. If you have a loved one, or if you are experiencing that end of life situation, it's kind of like there's no rule book or there's no handbook to follow. That's why Haven comes in and is so valuable. Jenny, yes, you've been a clinical social worker for a long time, but you've also done this end of life.
I've been with Haven now right about 4 years. So hospice isn't necessarily about death. That's not what we focus on. What we truly focus on is living. So quality of life, what it is that that person and their family needs to have a good life for the however long they live.
Well, and again,
And it's 6 months,
nobody
less,
knows.
maybe more, maybe less.
Nobody knows that because
Yeah.
it is so uncertain. And so
is.
that's another part
Yes.
of what you guys are all about, because you could at least give some advice to those who are saying, well,
And that's really where that advanced care planning comes into play. Advanced care planning is really about exploring and identifying what your goals, what your wishes are for what you would want if something were to happen. Many times we don't think about those things. We don't think about it until it's sometimes too late, and our family doesn't have a clue as to what we really want. And so those discussions are really about knowing what you want, what is acceptable, and making sure others are aware of that. And it can apply to anybody. It's not just for those in hospice.
well, and I'm going to give anyone who has an older parent that and should be thinking about this for themselves, because, and either one you guys can answer this too. So you have 4 children, you're toward the end of your life, but none of the kids know what you want because that conversation was never had.
Yeah.
How typical is that, Jenny?
Unfortunately, that's very typical. More than half of the individuals that I provide services to have never had those conversations with their families. They've never completed advanced directives. They may have designated somebody to make their healthcare decisions for them, but they've never had the conversation with that person of what they want.
Well, and so that's why Haven is such a godsend for some people. Do you, and again, I could see where a family would say, well, mom didn't want this, she didn't want to do this, she did want to do this. Well, no, that's not what she told me. Mm-hmm. Is that a scenario that you have dealt with?
We frequently see where families are in disagreement about what a patient would want when that patient can no longer make those wishes known. Terry Schiavo is a perfect example. We all know about the Terry Schiavo case.
Oh, and the government had to step in there.
That really demonstrates how important it is to have those conversations, to make sure that your loved ones know what you want, to have them documented in some form, whether through formal or informal directives, but to have those things because it's a gift for your family. They know they're going to honor your wishes.
All right, so what type of things should you be thinking about in those directives? I mean, obviously, do not resuscitate is probably one of the things where if you go into a code or you're in distress, that is part of it, right?
That is part of it. So advanced directives and advanced care planning are 2 different things.
Right.
Advanced directives are definitely a part of advanced care planning. But what advanced care planning does is it's a conversation that talks about wishes, goals of care, outcomes, fears, and it takes all of that conversation, and what it does is it kind of gives you a plan of what you want for your care, what is acceptable, what would be unacceptable outcomes. And so your advanced directives, so the living will, which is really talking about if you are in a vegetative state, if you have a terminal illness, if there's no hope of recovery, that's when your living will kicks in. And that is the one that talks about, do I want to be resuscitated? Do I want a gastric tube put in and have artificial feeding done? Do I want to be kept on a ventilator? What is it that I want if I have no hope of recovery or no hope of quality life? So that's the living will. And then of course there's the do not resuscitate order, which is really only about CPR. Do you want CPR in the event that your heart were to stop or you were to stop breathing? Or do you want to be allowed to have a natural death? CPR is not what it looks like on TV. It's a pretty traumatic event to experience for those that have experienced it. In addition, one of the most important things is to designate that healthcare surrogate. Who is it that's going to make those decisions for you? Because if you don't appoint somebody Florida has a way of identifying a person, and it may not be that person that you want to make your healthcare decisions for you. You know, there's a long chain in the statute. It describes it. So it's a court-appointed guardian if there is one. Then it's a spouse. Then it's your adult children. But the issue with that is it's a consensus. It has to be a majority of your adult children. Then if you don't have any adult children, it's your parents. So your parents have to be in agreement for your healthcare decisions. And then it's another family member, and then it's a friend, and then it can be somebody appointed by the court.
How, and again, you're talking, again, I could see where a lot of stress would occur if, and Debbie, you're shaking your head, it's a bad enough situation anyway. Mm-hmm. Now you're compounding that with nobody wants to make a decision, or decision is going to be made for you. How traumatic is that?
Exactly, and it happens so much of the time. I was very grateful that a family member of mine had written all that down, and folks that may be appointed as the surrogate or as the healthcare decision maker sometimes feel like they're actually making the decision when in fact all they're doing is carrying out the decision that was already made by their loved one. So if they can look at it that way, it takes the stress out of I'm making this decision, because they're not. They're simply pulling out the written directive and saying, this is what she wants, and I am going to make sure this is what happens.
How difficult is that? I mean, because that piece of paper has been signed by the person who, I mean, there's not much to argue with there, is there? But I'm sure there's still arguments that occur that, you know, maybe she didn't mean what she wrote. There
are still arguments, and it's harder to argue with something that's written. But that's part of the advanced care planning. When we don't do just the advanced directives, we also document our conversations. So we talk about their fears, we talk about their wishes, we talk about what it is that means they're going to have a good life, what are outcomes that would not be acceptable. We talk about, and we document all of those things. We talk about what it is that they need, what is a good life for them, even with their illness, or if they're healthy, in the event of a catastrophic injury or illness, what would be a desired outcome? What would be acceptable? And so we document those things, and we normally, in ACP, in those conversations, we include not just the person who's making the decisions. We want their healthcare surrogate and any other family members to be present so that everybody can hear and understand why that person is making those decisions and what drives those decisions. Because when somebody makes a decision on whether or not they want dialysis in the event that they have end-stage kidney disease, or whether or not they would want to be hooked up to a ventilator, those are all things that are very personal decisions, but there's a reason behind their decisions. And it isn't just because I don't want treatment. There's a reason, and that's part of what we do is we look at those reasons, we explore those reasons, and we document those reasons.
I'm talking to Jenny Lyons and Debbie French from Haven, which is now just Haven, not Haven Hospice. We're talking about advanced care planning, and we're going to do that some more and find out what conditions and what situations are best for taking that on. We'll do that when we come back. You're watching Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream, that I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly, just to come back in a new disguise and be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. My name is Mike McKee, and my guests represent Haven, which is short for Haven Hospice, and they're talking with Debbie French and Jenny Lyons, and we're talking about advanced care planning. You mentioned that this usually this conversation occurs when there's a situation, when either mom is not as sharp as she used to be, or dad can't seem to drive without bumping into garbage cans in the yard, and there are some things that you see the progression of end of life. But you say that's not the only time this conversation should be had.
No. Advanced care planning, there's these frequent barriers that people to talking about.
Well, no one likes to talk about it.
Right.
There's
that fear of,
ever.
I'm not going to die right now. There's no reason to talk about it. There's always it makes my family uncomfortable. I have other things to do. I'll get to it later. Unfortunately, later doesn't always come. And the time to think about it is when you are healthy, when you can really have that good idea of what you want initially. So we utilize the Respecting Choices format of advanced care planning, which was developed through Gunderson Health. And so there's 3 different steps to that. So there's the first steps, which is really for those that are healthy adults who aren't facing any chronic illnesses really, or are relatively healthy. And that really is just looking at explaining the program, kind of talking about what it is that they want, for who to make their healthcare decisions, what their spiritual, cultural, personal goals are, and how that would affect their health. And then looking at if a catastrophic event were to happen. Accidents happen, car accidents happen every day. A sudden cardiac event. We live in Florida. Lightning strikes many people. We never know what can happen. We can have a sudden event unexpectedly. And so this is really about, that first step is really about thinking, what would you want if a catastrophic event were to happen and you really had little or no chance to recover? But it's also about who's going to make those decisions for you, and is that person going to be able to follow your wishes? Because they're not making wishes that they want. Those decisions are based on your wishes. And that's so important. So then the next step is for those who have a chronic illness. Maybe they're just struggling with heart disease, or they have diabetes, or they have kidney disease. Whatever it is, what it does is it allows them to talk about lessons learned in previous treatments. What it is they do want for their treatment. How does that treatment align with their wishes, their hopes, their goals, and also with what it means to have a quality of life? Do they want to go in 3 days a week for dialysis? What is it that they truly want, and what do they want to focus on, and make sure that their healthcare decisions are in line with their wishes and hopes for the way they want to live?
Now, you mentioned that this conversation should be had with the entire family.
Yes.
Does it normally happen that way, or the other siblings don't have time for it, or just do whatever and whatever wishes? Do you see a lot of that?
I do see a lot of that, but when we do an advanced care planning session or conversation, our goal is to have at least the person, in addition to the person wanting to do their planning, the person who's going to make their healthcare decisions for them, to have them present for that conversation. And if they can't be physically present, then we encourage to have them attend via phone call. We can put them on speakerphone and we can have this entire conversation so that they're present for it. But we encourage them to have any family that wants to be a part of this decision to be present.
What about clergy, pastor? I mean, that's probably important to most people when making these end-of-life decisions, because if you're, in a kind of a touchy situation, so
So a person's faith or spirituality is a big part of how they make decisions, and also how they make decisions for their health care. What is or is not acceptable. We have certain faiths that certain types of healthcare is not acceptable. So blood products may not be something that is an option because of their spirituality. The other thing is they might have a faith that will not allow them to refuse life support once it's initiated. So in those instances, their spirituality plays a huge role in their decisions, and having clergy or a spiritual leader available, if that's what they choose, is always beneficial.
Now, I mentioned that mom is not as sharp as she used to be.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to be thinking about, you know, thinking from a child's point of view, we need to be thinking about planning for her demise. She now is not as capable as she once was of making decisions. What kind of, I mean, not that you got onset of dementia, but, you know, I mean, how is that handled?
So we can actually do advanced care planning. It just looks different with those individuals. At that point, then it's really getting the family together and talking about what have they said in the past, those tableside conversations, those dinner conversations, the conversation that the statements that may have been made by that person following a hospitalization or a treatment. You know, we've all maybe been watching the news and said, oh my God, I would never want that to happen to me. So it's really having them explore what they have heard their loved ones say, what previous experiences have led to, and what their goals for their life, what they felt was most important for their life. It's really about exploring all of that stuff with the family so that the decisions that get made are really the ones that the patient or their loved one would want to be made for them. So we are honoring those wishes and we are honoring those choices, and the family can feel secure that they are doing what their loved one would want.
So a family is gonna bring mom in and kind of talk and say, this is what's happening, and how much of advice of being unselfish, and that the fact that this is not your death, this is your loved one's death. Don't be selfish about this. I mean, is there a sense of a little bit of maturity that has to accompany this type of discussion?
So there is, but we have the conversation with the person who's going to be making the decision about what they feel their role is, and how do they feel that they can implement that role. And sometimes when we have these conversations, what comes out is, I can't do this. I can't be the one to make these decisions for Dad. I need somebody else to do this. And so if there's an alternate that's already been listed, we know that that alternate can then make those decisions. If the primary healthcare surrogate or healthcare advocate is going to abdicate their role. But the other thing is that if those advanced directives haven't yet been completed, then we can really explore who is the appropriate person to be making those decisions. Who do you want to honor your wishes? Because it is about your wishes, it's not about their wishes.
Yeah, and again, I see that play out quite a bit, and just having friends that are going through situations like this, that sometimes the family gets into little arguments about what is best and what should be best. And again, it's a time where it's not the greatest of times, but it's a discussion that people have to have. Let's talk about getting it done, say in your 40s, and you've got your kids. You got a living will, you got a regular will, and then you would decide you want to do this, but certain things change. Say you get divorced and you get remarried. Can this plan be adjusted 3, 5, 10 years down the road?
So the great thing about advanced care planning is that it should develop and grow as your health changes, as your family changes, as roles change, as anything can change and should be updated regularly. Advanced care planning, you should always review your advanced directives, because what may be beneficial for you in your 20s may not be the same in your 40s when you have that family, as opposed to when you're 65 and have just been diagnosed with cancer. So things can change, and they should be, your documents and your planning should change as your situation changes.
Now, is there a cost to this? Because it seems like there's a lot of work involved, especially if you've got to do a lot of coordination, or is it kind of like an investment that you guys think is a great way to be at the end?
There is no cost to this. It's a community service that we provide. We encourage everybody to have these conversations and to have these directives. Part of that is that it does make healthcare easier. makes healthcare easier for the person, it makes healthcare easier for the family, but it also allows your medical providers to know what your wishes are. So they're not going to do anything that may be burdensome to you. You may not want that outcome. It's, Carrie Ann Quinlan in the 70s, when there was not the ability to have living wills and have your family make your decisions for you, and it was kind of up in the air, was on life support for a long time. And it took her family going to court to be allowed to make those decisions and to honor her wishes. The same with Terry Schiavo. There was the big argument, and that's why the advanced care planning is so important. It's so important for families and for you to have that information, and it reduces the burden, not just on the person specifically, but on the families. It also ensures that healthcare is adequate for that person going forward. So it's something that we encourage everybody to have. It doesn't matter. We will come to you. You don't have to come to us. We will meet you where you are, whether you're at your home, wherever it is, we will go there.
I think the biggest takeaway for me in all of this is do this and be a little uncomfortable now versus do this at the end of someone's life and maybe you don't talk to your spouses or your siblings anymore. And so there's a rift between a family that could have been avoided with discussion that happened early on when everybody was clear in their head.
Yeah.
But I can see where emotions can really take over this whole situation and really get bad. We're going to take another break, and when we come back on Perspective, we'll talk about how to arrange this type of service through Haven. We'll do that. Don't go away.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate. It's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
Welcome back to Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television and WCJX and WQHL radio stations. We thank the listeners who are tuning into the program today. Debbie French and Jenny Lyons represent Haven, which is end of life, but they do a lot more. You can find out more information about what they do by either logging on to their website, beyourhaven.org, or you can make a phone call and someone will direct you where you need to go. If it's end-of-life care, if you want to volunteer. I know that Haven always needs donations from the community to continue the services they do, but they also have opportunities for volunteers in a real tough situation. But the volunteers that do it best are ones with the empathy, that have been there before and can help others who are going through a same situation. So guys, thank you for being on the program. Thank you for shedding some light on something that could avoid a lot of hassle and problems at the end of someone's life. Thank you for watching Perspective on Florida Gateway College Television. Until next time, I'm Mike McKee. So long.